Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm excited to be here tonight. Scoot closer to the mic. Better? Okay. I gotta start again. I'm Jasmine, and I'm tonight, final talk, a lot of great talks tonight, and invasive European green crab in Alaska's coastal ecosystem. To start, I'm gonna ask everybody to take a moment to think on what is something you love in coastal Alaska. When you have that something in 2 or 3 words, turn to your neighbor and please share that. Thank you for your participation. You didn't know this is an interactive talk. So I hear some giggles and some smiles. There's a lot. No, I lost the crowd. There's a lot to love in Alaska coastal ecosystem. I'm guessing that someone out there shared salmon fishing or dip netting. There might have been someone that shared seabirds and shorebirds. I'm confident someone in the audience said mussels available for my experiments. Okay. All of these things that, crab, being able to eat Dungeness, Tanner, king crab. All of these things that we love in coastal ecosystem can be affected or threatened by invasive European green crab. So we're going to learn more about them in the next 20 minutes. I'll cover some basics on marine invasive species, then speak specifically about European green crab, share how we do early detection and monitoring for this invader, and how we can respond together. A little bit more about myself. As Danielle said, I work at Kachemak Bay National Estuary Research Reserve. It's always a mouthful, so I'm going to refer to it as the Reserve or KBNERR. It is a state-federal partnership. The reserve system is a nationwide system designated by NOAA. We all have a state partner. Ours is University of Alaska Anchorage Center for Conservation Science. This is a map of the boundary of the research reserve shown in yellow here. It includes all of Kachemak Bay, so it's quite a large area. And I am the coordinator for the Harmful Species Program, monitoring for harmful algal blooms and marine invasive species. So what is an invasive species? An invasive species is a species brought to an area by human activity, whether intentional or unintentional, and causes harm to either the ecosystem, the economy, or human health, or any combination of those. Pathways for introduction are variable, and I'm going to speak just about marine invasive species here. So one pathway for introduction is the transport of live seafood or bait. Those organisms arrive alive, and this is great and good, except for if they escape or are improperly disposed. This can be a new introduction of an invasive species. This pathway is actually how it's thought that invasive European green crab were brought from the east coast of the United States to the west coast of the United States, to the San Francisco Bay Estuary in 1989. Another pathway is the illegal disposal of aquarium species into either a waterway or down your drain. These activities are illegal because they can lead to an invasive species introduction. Marine debris is another possible pathway of introduction. So as this debris floats around the ocean, organisms grow on it or take shelter in it. One example, a large example of this is 2011 tsunami in Japan. A lot of marine debris was brought into the North Pacific. That debris circulated and arrived on the shores of North America over the next 6 years at least, bringing with it over 300 live organisms to the shoreline with that debris. Biofouling is another method. Biofouling is anything growing on marine infrastructure. So this could be a boat hull, or a hole in a boat, probably too. It also on a mariculture gear, fishing gear. It could be on a jackup drill rig. In 2012, a jackup rig came into Kachemak Bay. Alaska is a low regulation state. There's no requirement for clean, drain, dry practices to prevent invasive species from arriving on such structures. However, this rig invited Research Reserve staff. They volunteered to survey to investigate the potential for marine invasives on the rig. So it's a really wonderful thing that happened here, but it's not required. And finally, ballast water. Thank you for talking about ballast water earlier. So ballast water also can transport marine organisms. When those ships take on that water, any eggs, European green crab larvae, fish, any organisms that are in that water go with it. If it's not treated, when the ships dispel that water, those organisms can be a new introduced species. A lot of good work has gone on to regulate ballast water. The RCAC has been involved in that, but it is thought the main contributor for invasive species introduction historically and globally, the biggest one. Okay, with that little bit of background, your invasive European green crab. The first thing I want you all to know about invasive European green crab is that they're not always green, even though it's in their name. I'm so sorry, you just can't hold on to that piece. They come in a wide variety of colors. These are all European green crab at different ages, so you can see a wide variety of shell colors and patterns. However, raise your hands up to your head here. We've got 5 fingers on the outside of each eye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can lower your hands. Thank you all for humoring me. That is the shell shape of European green crab. None of our native crab species have that same shell shape. So 5 spines on the outside of each eye is a distinctive characteristic of European green crab. They're also relatively small. So they only get to be 4 inches in maximum diameter. And other distinguishing features, they have 3 rostral bumps between the eyes, and their hind legs are flattened. They're in the swimming crab family, and those flattened legs allow them to swim better. This is a map showing the range of European green crab around the world. The blue area in Europe and North Africa is where they're native. The green areas is where they've already invaded, and unfortunately, we added Southeast Alaska to the green areas on this map this summer. What you can notice, I'm going to dare to use the pointer. Yes. Okay. The red habitat around the world on this map is areas where the environmental conditions would support European green crab survival and establishment. The rest of Southeast Alaska through the Gulf out to the Aleutian Islands and up into the lower Bering Sea is all suitable habitat for European green crab. More specifically, the habitat we find them in is intertidal, down to a maximum of 55 meters, but they really do seem to be most dominant in intertidal depths. They dominate in salt marshes, eelgrass beds, and protected bays. On the Northeast Pacific coast in that invasive range, they seem to be less common in the rocky intertidal area. So it's more those soft sediment areas that we see them. Why are we so concerned about European green crab? There are ecosystem engineers. So this is an image from a estuary salt marsh on the East Coast, and all these holes are from European green crabs burrowing back into that sediment. So they really contribute to erosion and sedimentation on the soft sediment banks. They also disrupt the vegetation growing there. They are voracious. They are little crabs, but they eat a lot. An adult European green crab consume 40 half-inch clams per day. They have decimated clown populations on the East Coast where they've really their numbers have got really high. They are also pretty agile. They can capture a juvenile salmon. Yeah, they can capture other juvenile fishes as well, but they can capture juvenile salmon. They are also, they're digging habitats. They're digging habits. They'll pull out worms and other infauna, competing with our shorebird species and other nearshore organisms that eat those. And they're also incredibly aggressive. They can eat and outcompete other crabs that are up to the same size that they are. So they're competing with our native crab species for food, as well as directly consuming them. They're omnivores. The list goes on. They can eat eelgrass beds as well as seeds. So their digging habits will destroy eelgrass beds as well as direct consumption. They're also incredibly resilient. So they have a wide range of temperatures and salinities that they can tolerate. This is an estuary at the Tutka Bay, down in Kachemak Bay. You have like marine environment here, brackish into freshwater, and a European green crab could survive in any of these areas. They also down from freezing up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so quite tolerant. I just got done telling you that they eat a lot. They also have adaptations to survive times of food scarcity. So this is a little cutout of their carapace or top shell. These gills here are gills you would find in most crabs for absorbing oxygen out of the water. This larger set of gills lower here in the image can absorb nutrients straight out of the water. They can pull amino acids and dissolve nutrients out of the water during times of low food scarcity. They're resilient. And they also reproduce quite quickly. So this female green crab is holding a brood of about 200,000 eggs, and she can produce that twice a year. Once those eggs are released, they have a similar life stage to other crabs. It's a zoea stage, it's planktonic. They have this long spine off the back of their head there that helps them to stay afloat in the currents, be carried by our currents. Green crab larvae, zoea, can survive 90 days in the currents, so they can travel quite a long ways. Since their introduction to the West Coast, it has mostly been through larval transport that green crabs have been moving northward and south as well. So this map shows the general currents, the big currents in the North Pacific. So here's San Francisco Bay, where they were originally introduced. The California current has carried them south to about Baja, and then the other currents have been moving them northward, reaching Alaska this last summer. This animation shows the progression since their introduction to the West Coast through the years. And what you notice is there's some times where there are big jumps. These are correlated with El Nino years. So those warming events, greater numbers of larval green crab can survive, and therefore we see new populations popping up farther north. One exception to this, it was a first introduction to Vancouver Island. That jump was from mariculture gear that wasn't inspected or cleaned properly and brought European green crab to the island. So what is the status of invasive green crab in Alaska as we know it today? Invasive green crab were found on Annette Island in July of 2022. Annette Island is shown here in the red circle. It's right on the border of Alaska and Canada. If we zoom in there, you can see it's south of Kachemak here. This map really shows the extensive amount of coastline that Alaska has and a lot of habitat available for green crab to invade. So although we know that they're here and Fish and Game got out this summer and did some other investigating to look for European green crab in other nearby areas, none were detected yet. It is likely that there are other places in Southeast Alaska. This image shows the habitat where they were found on Annette Island. The first detection of green crab was by Metlakatla Indian Community's Department of Fish and Wildlife. They began looking for early detection of green crab in 2020 after the detection of green crab in nearby Haida Gwaii Island, just 60 miles south of them. And you can see here, this is a low-grade beach. There's some eelgrass beds here at the low tide line, not very rocky, and a protected bay. So the kind of habitat that we expect from our partners farther south, where they've been seeing green crab, is where so far they're seeing them on Annette Island as well. Since July 2022, the Metlakatla Department of Fish and Wildlife has caught over 640 live invasive green crab. They are varying sizes. So you can see this is a carapace that they found and a whole crab here. So these are two different age classes. So although they just detected them this summer, it's possible that they've been there a little bit longer. You got to put the traps where the crabs are. It's a tricky part. They're using modified traps. So they have some commercially bought traps, but then also to increase their catch rates, they started using and the gear that they had available, they modified some oyster gears and were able to capture more crabs. So really great, their ingenuity and the way that they're working to reduce their numbers there on the island. And as I mentioned, Alaska Department of Fish and Game trapped nearby, no additional detections at this time. So responding together to invasive green crab requires early detection and monitoring efforts statewide. The reason why early detection is so important, this is a statewide effort, is I'm going to share this graph with you about the invasion curve. So what we have on the x-axis, this axis here is time. Over here is area of infestation or number of invasive species, you could think of it. And here is our control costs. And what you notice from species introduction, you get a lot of return and low cost at this early part of the invasion. Early detection and a rapid response is going to lead to more return for your effort than later on when you have these exponential increase in your invader and the costs are much, much higher, as well as the ecological and economical impacts. The Alaska Invasive Species Partnership is a partnership formed from a variety of state, federal, tribal partners, nonprofits, coming together to share information about invasive species. And there is a marine invasive subcommittee. And through this committee, we share all the folks that are doing early detection and monitoring efforts around the state. This partnership is incredibly important in sharing resources, information, knowledge sharing, different trap types that we're using, education and outreach. It's really been an important partnership for us to be planning and responding to marine invasions, the European green crab being the current hot and big issue, but there are certainly potential for others along the way. To do this early detection work, we use a variety of trap types. The first one is the Fukui folding trap. This is what they look like here. It's a stake down at low tide line. We also use shrimp traps, minnow traps, or as I mentioned in the case of Metlakatla, modified traps. And through the partnership, we've been discussing and looking at doing some modifying of even just the Fukui traps to see if we can increase our catch rates. All the traps are baited with herring or cat food. And they're a typical early detection trapping event includes five traps laid parallel to the shoreline. You can see these are school groups in Kachemak Bay doing an early detection event. 5 traps laid out again parallel to at low tide. They're set for 24 hours, a full tidal cycle. And then we go back and measure everything that's caught in the traps. So we identify the crabs to species. We measure their size to get an idea of different size classes and age groups. And then we determine if the crabs are female or male. We can do this based on their abdomen shape. So a female crab has a really rounded abdomen to hold all those eggs until they're released. Oh, that's so exciting. No, not okay. And the male crabs have more of a lighthouse or a tower shape abdomen. You guys know it's coming, right? Pop quiz. Here's a kelp crab caught in a decorator crab caught in Kachemak Bay. Male or female? You're brilliant, fast learners. This is a female. You guys are all ready to come out trapping with me next month. No, I'm just kidding. Not till July, when it's warmer. So the early detection, we have trained community monitors to do this, give them the training to set the traps, identify the crabs, measure, identify male, female. Tribal partners are doing this throughout the state and federal agencies. And in Kachemak Bay, pre-pandemic, we would also go out with school groups and do this, the trapping events. And we are looking forward to getting back in the classroom this next year. So what do you do if you think you found a European green crab? Now what? Okay, first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yes, it's a European green crab. Take a picture. Take a lot of pictures. This is going to make it easier for someone to verify your suspicion of a European green crab. Get details on the location. No detail is going to be too small to allow folks to go out and do a trapping or check what's going on out there, and then report it. Do not keep suspected green crab. They are a prohibited species. So photograph it. Okay, you can report the invasive species to this hotline. It's a statewide invasive species hotline, 877 invasive. Alaska Department of Fish and Game takes reports of all invasive species. Or you can report it online, also Alaska Department of Fish and Game website. You can identify what type of species you're reporting, click the link there, and again, submit your photo, detail, location for that report. Moving forward, our invasive green crab early detection and response goals include increasing awareness and monitoring efforts. We want to support partners in launching new programs. This includes training in the methods to do carapace molt surveys. So a carapace, which is a molt of a crab, is actually the first indication that Metlakatla had that European green crab had made it to their island, was doing a beach walk and seeing that molt. Or training in trapping events. Looking at incorporating eDNA sampling, this is environmental DNA sampling, and Metlakatla is already doing this as well. You can get a scoop of water and then send it in for analysis to see if green crab DNA is in that water analysis. It's one other tool available to us for early detection. Collaborating with partners to develop and implement a rapid response drill. So this is an opportunity for agencies to determine jurisdiction, to get a handle on resources and collaboration for a rapid response for when additional detections might arise, and transferable for other species and hopefully throughout the state, and identify priority areas for monitoring a response. We have a lot of coastline in Alaska and limited resources. So unfortunately, we are going to need to decide where we put those resources for early detection and response. And we can do that based on habitat suitability, cultural importance, ecological, and economical importance. Alaska is the most recent state to experience European green crab invasion, but we're not the first. There is a whole body of transfer of knowledge from BC and the lower 48. And this really is going to be a collaborative effort because, as we looked at earlier, it's a connected system. So populations farther south of us are down current, as it would be. If those populations are sending out a lot of green crab larvae, they're coming our way. So this is going to be a collaborative effort. Prevention and increased policy around clean, drain, dry practices for folks out on the water. Again, early detection and a coordinated response across organizations, not just within the state, but farther south of us as well. So thank you again so much for inviting me here. I hope that folks think of the Research Reserve as a partner in education, monitoring, training, and research. We just really value the place-based and collaborative partnerships in the state. So with that, I'll take any questions. But before I take questions, if anybody wants to find me afterwards, I do have a green crab and resin and some other props if people want to see that.
So my question is, you had a slide there said you couldn't keep the green crabs. Is it prohibitive? You want us to let it go? You're supposed to smash it with a hammer, put it in the freezer? What are you supposed to do with it?
I really wish I'd put money on somebody was going to ask me about that question. Yeah, so it is a prohibited species, and that is in line with the laws that we see in Washington and Oregon as well. The reason for that is that, well, the best example I have is if you show me a red sports car, that's a nice red sports car. I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with if it's a Ferrari or whatever. So the identifying it, we want to make really sure that we're not inadvertently causing harm to our native species. So that's why the training is part of getting these monitors out there to make sure that they're identifying green crab. But any report of one is going to be responded to. So we also don't want there to be any confusion that people are moving inadvertently or purposefully an invasive species that can be so damaging to our ecosystem. Not substance. You have to leave it. You have to leave it. Take pictures, leave it, please report it.
So I had a question too. So you showed that invasion curve and the cost of control. So it sounds like we're still pretty early on that invasion curve,
yes,
at least with Southeast Alaska. And I was just curious if you could comment on like the control and eradication options that may be available and kind of where the planning is at in those stages.
Yes, the physical removal and trapping is what we have for response for European green crab. There has not been, folks have looked into it, certain hormone or pheromone research, or if there's something specific about green crab that we could have some sort of a chemical treatment. But with a marine environment that's such an open system, and with all of our native crab species, so far there hasn't been any promising other activities to keep their numbers reduced besides that physical trapping. What I can say in areas in the lower 48 or in Canada that have been dealing with green crab invasion, the places that folks have chosen to put resources and to respond to European green crab, they've been able to keep the numbers suppressed in a way that allows the system to continue to function. No one has been successful yet at eradicating green crab once they're introduced, but with the trapping methods that we have and the effort, you can keep the numbers functionally low enough that the ecosystem continues to function. Oh no, I forgot my new favorite prop. There's a cookbook for green crab. There's a cookbook for green crab. Yes, there is. So yes, you can eat them. And there's thank you for that question. So they are edible. They are relatively small. So in a place like Alaska, where we are so blessed with so many good other larger crab species, it might be a hard sell, but possible. Also, there's research happening in Canada about using crab carapaces and shells to make plastics. So there are other opportunities and things we don't yet know about that can be used to respond and take this invader and make a resource that we can use and get them removed from the system in a and contribute in some other way.
How sensitive are these green crabs to ice? Are they very sensitive? Like,
Oh, that's a good question. I loved your talk, by the way.
thank you.
I don't have a good. They can survive down to freezing. That I know. But below 32 degrees, I haven't seen anything that says that they're that cold tolerant. They are plastic in their responses. So a green crab in California cannot tolerate the cold as well as a green crab from British Columbia, and vice versa. A BC crab doesn't tolerate the heat as well as a California crab. So I would like to think that they won't tolerate ice very well, but I remains to be seen.
What I'm hoping
Yeah.
is that occasional variability, and we get a cold winter, we get some ice, maybe we can stop them in their tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, and the larva is not as, their range of tolerance is more narrow than the adults. So the timing of those cold snaps and when the larvae are pushed back into our estuaries and near shore environments is going to be important for their spread.
Thank you for your presentation. Couple questions. First one, do they have natural predators, and do birds eat them? I mean, because you said they eat a lot of the things that our shorebirds eat. So do birds eat them? And the second question is, they're European green crabs, but on your first map, Mediterranean doesn't have any. How come?
That's a great question. I don't 100% know. Danielle, do you know the answer? I think the Mediterranean might be too warm. So they do have an upper end of temperature. So it's possible the Mediterranean's too warm. I haven't been to the Mediterranean, so I don't know how warm it is, but that's my gut. Yeah, and it's Northern Africa, but yeah, that map doesn't have them going into the Mediterranean. So that I love giving talks because the audience always asks questions that I haven't thought about. Like I'm going to go out and trap and take anyway. And your other question about their natural predators. Yes, in Europe, their birds do eat them. I think there might be some large fishes also. As far as invasive species go, it is rarely, if never the case, that the predators in that new environment are enough to suppress or eradicate an invader, unfortunately. Also, there is evidence that otters seem to exclude green crab from deeper but still intertidal water. So otters do seem to eat them and keep them just kind of pushed a little bit higher than they might be otherwise in those areas where otters are. Yeah. Good questions.
Just in response to that last one, I mean, I think predators generally don't control or obliterate their prey. A good example of another introduced species was the zebra mussel going into the Great Lakes. And there's lots of things that eat the zebra mussels, but they're just harvesting the cream off. I mean, they're not controlling them at all.
Thanks. Sounds like that eDNA is the easiest way to figure out if there's anything in the area, huh?
It's one tool. So it's a great tool. With eDNA though, it tells you that they're present near.
Sure.
So yes, it's a tool. If we get a hit with eDNA, then you're going to want to go to that area and be doing trapping in the suitable habitat. There's also an important thing to understand with whichever organism you're looking at, there's a timing that's important. So with green crab, they have that hard carapace. They don't shed as much DNA as say like a salmon does with its scales. So you are going to be wanting to collect your environmental DNA sample during the time of molt. And we still have some learning to do in these northern latitudes where they're newly invaded, what that timing is around green crab molt and egg release.
I'm a little bit cynical about stuff like this, but they seem to be the dandelions of the ocean.
Yep, I might use that later.
Do they have commercial fisheries in Europe?
I don't know about Europe. I will tell you that my education has been really focused on where they're invasive. In the East Coast, they are doing experimental fisheries, and there's some interested folks and some collaborations that have happened where they've opened up the opportunity to fish for a green crab and get them to restaurants and created cookbooks. So there is some creative ways that folks are looking at how to respond to this invasive species. Currently in Alaska, that would be challenging because of the prohibited species piece. And hopefully we don't get to a place where we're looking at creating a fishery for them. But in other places where their numbers are quite high, they are looking at those sorts of solutions.
I mean, couldn't we call it feral instead of prohibited?
I don't make the rules.
Oh, I did just, yeah.
No, they are good. These are good questions. And there has been a lot of pressure to get green crab on the prohibited species list. And the reasoning behind that really comes back to, we don't want to have any doubt that people aren't moving them on purpose, right? That threat is huge. And again, green crab have not, the efforts to suppress and keep their population down so we don't have big seed banks pumping Zoea into our current system is really, really important. The difference between one green crab and the potential for a bunch of our native crab species to be smashed or unfortunately demised of because they were thought to be green crab, it's a balance and a risk that those that make these decisions, that's where they landed up for right now.
Is there I used to crab fish. I'm a fisherman, and I've seen little crab like that, and they have hair on them. And I mean, there's, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 I could think of little crabs.
Yeah.
Small like that.
Horse crabs.
But I mean, they look a lot like it.
Yes, they do. I think one species that we catch commonly in Kachemak Bay is the hairy, we call it the hairy horse crab. And they do look very similar. So this Washington Sea Grant, and it's connected to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game page now, has the human brain learns really great by comparison. And so they have developed, so they've taken some great photos of a native short crab and a green crab in a very similar environment. And you can look at that and learn how to ID the different crabs that are similar looking. It's a really great tool. And that's the kind of thing that community monitors and communities that are looking to start their own trapping. That's the kind of training and practice that we would be doing along with guides. I really like props that folks can take with them out to the beach and help them to identify that. And again, just coming back to taking a picture, getting some other eyes on it to identify and go out and confirm it. So yes, there are crab species that look similar to the European green crab, and we're going to have to sort that out and get practiced on identifying them as a state. Hopefully I know how to do that.
So I like your list of partners, and I saw ADF and G, but it was kind of reserved to one area. So does statewide, or the areas that it is really affected as ADF and G working collaboratively to try and work on this problem?
100%. So that they're going out, and their efforts to trap down in Southeast Alaska this summer was in response to the detection of green crab. They were able to get out there in these areas that other people aren't trapping and looking to get a better sense of what the extent might be right now of green crab in Alaska. Tammy Davis is the single employee at Fish and Game who does invasive species, not marine invasive species, invasive species. So the partnership and all those relationships that we have are why it's so important, because there's just the work's not getting done otherwise.
So in their larval stage, is there any indication that they might be a good food source for salmon, which are much more popular, much more populous up here?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to eat what's available in the water column. If we get lots of green crab larvae there, I would think would be subject to the same predation that other crab larvae. They're not toxic or somehow different in any way that I know of that would prevent them from being eaten. But again, predators don't eat things down to eradication, so it would be a part of the control, but or the suppression of numbers, but it's not going to be 100%.
Thank you.